you begin to think about God more. I call them somewhat those God moments, the God talks. So this is one of those times when you're thinking about God, not about the Christian religion, but about the God of the Christian faith. And during this time that we have been in this social quarantine, where people are no longer able to so-called do church the way that they've been doing church, the church gathering may go away, but God doesn't. The corporate worship on a larger scale goes away, but worship doesn't have to go away. So I've been thinking a lot about God lately. And I wondered if you had been thinking about God too. I've been thinking about this thing that we call faith. I've been thinking about the Christian's faith in God, and I'm using words that are sincere, that have meaning, and not really filling in space, but just thinking about God. What if we were practicing a place-based religion? What if we have been practicing a place-based form of Christianity, to where it's connected to a place and to a building? And during this time I saw pictures, and in these pictures what I saw on Sunday were men and women encircling a church building, or let's say a meeting space of the church, a meeting house, and these men and women that identify as Christian, they were on their hands and knees, and their hands were up in worship. And you're like, wow. And then you were like, what? Because they were all around the church building, and their hands were up in worship, because they didn't go inside. They were on the outside, and their hands were up in worship. And I was thinking, and as I saw that, I began to get a little sad, because I wanted to say, God's not inside of the building. God is now inside of the people that are encircling the building on their hands and knees, with their hands raised in praise, with their hands raised in worship. And after watching that, at first I marveled. I was like, wow, that's really deep. But then what happened, I became sad, because I was thinking that they were coming to the building to connect with God together. And I began to realize that the truth about the Christian's faith in God is that God is not in the building, but God is in the people. It was as if they were locked out of this church building. But if they knew the God of the Christian faith, and I believe that they do, then although they weren't entering into the church building, it did not mean that they could not enter into God, you know? And I think that this is a time of reset for us. We do it in business all the time. We do it in athletics. We do it in many other sectors of society. On what's really at the core of our faith. Being a sin dodger, yeah, that's one of those. I'm pretty good at avoiding sin. But that's not the Christian's faith in God, avoiding sin. And so when you have time to stop and meditate, then you begin to say, wow, avoiding sin doesn't put you at the feet of God. Practicing a moral life doesn't put you at the feet of God, but pursuing Him and going to Him puts you into closer proximity to God. Because I believe that God wants to have a personal relationship with you and with me. Yesterday, I was meeting with, I wouldn't say meeting, we're in that whole social distancing thing. We have our masks on and gloves, and there were a couple of pastors that I was with. And I decided to talk with them about God. And I said, tell me about your God. And they were quiet not because they couldn't, but because they figured I was going somewhere with this. I said, tell me about your God. And then speaking about us, I said, isn't it amazing that we can have conversations about Christianity and barely ever mention God? I don't have faith in the Christian religion. I have faith in the Christian's God. And it amazes me how we spend hours upon hours in service and Bible studies, and so many of us know so little about God. But we know about some of the history about the people of God. But what about God? It was time to reflect, and so as I began to reflect, I said, wow, I've had all of these, like a lot of deep conversations about God, or more so about the Christian faith. I've heard heretics because they now have an Islamic name, let's say, or an Arabic name, or maybe they have a Hebrew name now, and they begin to call Christ Yeshua, and they do all of this stuff, and they still don't talk about God. So I said to these brothers, I said, hey, what's your God like? Tell me about your God. Can I talk to you for an hour about your faith and learn nothing about God? Can I come and sing and watch performances in praise and worship and learn nothing about your God? What if the Christian faith is more than being just about what they call, big word here, ecclesiology? What is this ecclesiology? When in the Bible it talks about that we that are Christian, we are the ecclesia. And that ecclesia is a plural word when used. It's not an individual word, but it's a plural word, ecclesia, the called out ones. And the ecclesiology really talks about how we live, and I think I'm guilty too of spending more time telling people how to live and how not to live than telling them about their God. What makes you Christian and what makes us Christian is not our religious practice. What makes us Christian is not the church or denomination that we go to. What makes us Christian is our faith in God. What makes us Christian is not our willingness to take a chance because we read a scripture and now we're going to step out on that scripture. That is not what makes us Christian. Our having faith is not what makes us Christian. What makes us Christian is having faith in God. People have faith in a lot of things, and so faith in itself is no magic wand. People have faith in a chair, so they sit in it. They have faith in their car, so they get in without thinking about it and drive to work. No, what makes us Christian is our faith in God. So brothers and sisters, tell me about your God. What's he like? Tell me about your God. What are his attributes? What do you like about his character? I love the movies where the guy that's courting the farmer's daughter, he comes in and he has a seat on the couch and his daughter is upstairs with mom putting on her final touches before she goes out. And the father, as we do as fathers, we have these classic one-liners. And in these one-liners, we sit across from the young man and we ask him the question when we say something like, "What are your intentions with my daughter?" And they'll tell you, "Oh, sir, my intentions are honorable," and da-da-da. And they'll go on. And then we ask another question. They teach us this in dad school. We say, "What do you like about my daughter?" "Pardon me, sir? What do you like about my daughter?" You say you like her. If they've been together a while, you ask, "What do you love about my daughter?" "Pardon me? What do you love about her? What makes her unique and what makes her special to you in your life?" When you look at the world around us and you see all of the destruction and the deceit and the hurt and the pain, what is the beauty that you see in my daughter? And there's a world that waits for us that have faith in God to answer that question right there. Christian, what do you like about God? What do you love about God? What do you mean? No, that's the wrong answer. If you're sitting and you're talking on Farmer Joe's couch and he says, "What do you mean what I like about your daughter? What do you mean what do I love about your daughter?" What do you love about God? When you reflect upon God, what do you like about him? And so that's the basis of this talk, and I think it'll be the basis of future talks. What do you like about God? What do you love about God? Tell me about your God. For many people, God is a stranger. Really don't have a relationship with Him. And He and I really don't fellowship. You know, and on the relationship chart, you go from being a stranger to an acquaintance. An acquaintance is someone that knows someone that introduces you. Maybe you bump into each other at a conference. Maybe you're in a coffee shop and someone catches your eye. There's something about them. They have what the French call that je ne sais quoi. And you reach out and you shake hands, and I'm John. I'm Susie. You shake hands and you say, it's nice to make your acquaintance. And then you go your separate ways as strangers. Maybe you speak for a few minutes. But other than those few moments, you don't have any planned or future fellowship with that person. You say, I met a really nice guy. And maybe some of us are like that with God. We're not exactly strangers with Him, but we met a really nice God. It was a really neat encounter. And there are some people who may identify as Christian or people of God who are just acquainted with Him. They learned His name, and when you see Him and you go to another place, not the coffee shop, but now you're at Zoe's or another place, and you look up and you see the person that you made acquaintance with. Every now and then you have a way of bumping. You find yourself bumping into them. And you say, John. He looks and says, Sally. It seems like we're bumping into each other a lot lately. And that's the way it is with God. He's the acquaintance that you bump into every now and then. Before you made their acquaintance, you look over and someone will say, hey, do you know John? And you say, no, he's a stranger. That's the relationship. Or you're sitting there talking and a friend walks up or your brother, and you give your brother a hug or your sister a hug, and you say, hey, I'd like for you to meet John. He's an acquaintance of mine. We don't have any real trust or any real foundational relationship, but we seem to bump into each other a lot around town. And there's a phase of our relationship with God where we're not really in deep relationship with Him. He's not a friend. He's not even our God yet. We're just kind of acquainted with Him. When we're out and about in life, we look up and, hey, what's up? Oh, hey, John, what's up, man? Good to see you. Hey, God, good to see you. You popped up again in my thoughts. It's the early days of getting to know God. You really haven't committed to going anywhere particular to meeting Him. You're just an acquaintance. Someone say, well, how do you know what type of relationship you have with God? If you don't know Him, you're a stranger. That's your relationship. If God is someone that you bump into every now and then. God. Yeah. You know, I heard about you. My grandmother used to talk about you, and I remember a Sunday school teacher, she would talk about, we would do these plays about these Jewish cultures and customs, and we put on the robes like sheep, and we stand by him, and yeah, Jesus, yeah. I'm acquainted with him. And many of us are merely acquainted with God. And truly we haven't been that overwhelmed by him. But he's a really great person. He's affable. When I see God, it's pretty cool, it's pretty nice. Wow, that's a really nice God. Well, what do you think about God? Oh, he's an acquaintance of mine. Do you think that God would do this or do that? Well, I really don't know him that well. I've seen him at the coffee shop. I've seen him at the building on 6th Avenue. I've seen him on the building on Bessemer Superhighway. But I really don't know him that well, so I can't really vouch for him. But he seems like a really good God. There's something about God that kind of catches your eye, and you begin to think and muse. You begin to think about God. As you're going through life, he pops in your mind every now and then. Maybe someone will come along and ask you, have you been thinking about God a lot lately? You know, I have been thinking about God. It's like two women that are having a cup of hot tea, and they talk about what's going on in your life, and they say, I met a really great guy. Or they say, whatever happened to the person, God, that you met a few weeks ago that you really enjoyed meeting? Have you thought about getting to know him? You know, I've been thinking about God a lot lately. God seems like a really great person to get to know. So what you do, you start hanging out at the coffee shop more and more around the same time that you saw God the first time. Hoping to bump into God. Hoping to have an encounter with him. You start going where God usually goes, and so you don't know why, but one day you decide to get up. And you get dressed, and it's the weekend, and it's not normal, and you put on some very nice clothing. And you go down to the building with the cross on top of it. Can't really explain why, but I made the acquaintance of God. I made his acquaintance, and after I met him, I started hearing people talk about him. I'd be at work, and every now and then I'd hear somebody talk about God. And I'd be flipping through the radio station, and every now and then I would hear someone talking about God. And I thought, maybe it would be cool to get to know God. So that Sunday morning I get up and I put on my tie. Or maybe I throw on some jeans and a polo shirt. Throw on my casual shoes, and I go to the building. It says Church of God. I think it's a place where God hangs out. So I go there and I walk in, hoping to bump into God. And if I go there on that Sunday and I see God there, or the culture is so thick enough where everyone tells me God's going to be there, and everybody that's there, they've met God as well, and it's kind of a cool place to be because you realize that you've met someone. That all these folks that are here in this crowd, in this building that they call the church, that they all like God too, and they met him, and you ask them, have you met God? And they say, yes. Oh, wow, God is amazing. And you say, I know, I've only met him a few times. I've bumped into him. We introduced ourselves, and, I just thought it'd be great to get to know him. And one by one, they get to say, well, yeah, I got to know God a while back. I was going through a tough time, and God introduced himself to me. My mother had passed, and I didn't know what to do with it. There's something about losing a mother. And they recount the story of how they were alone and how they were empty, and then how all of a sudden God came and he filled my heart, and I can't explain it. They sit in the back of this church building, and there's a guy that's there, and he's overhearing the conversation, and he says, oh, yeah. I met God too. I had a similar experience with him. I had just gotten a divorce, and I had 3 kids, and I had always wanted to be a daddy. And here I found myself divorced. I was depressed and I was sad, and I didn't know how I would go on. But I'd get up every morning and I'd go to work. And I'd come home and I would just exist in darkness. But one day God came to visit me. The hole that was in my heart, he filled it, and I can't explain it to you. But somehow, God brought me across the gulf from emptiness to the joy returning again. That's how I met God. And so you're this person who is just merely an acquaintance with God, but wanted to know God more. They're here now, hearing these stories about God. Another person chimes in and gives a testimony about this God who Sue had made an acquaintance with. This lady says, oh yeah, I had a similar encounter with God. I was sinking deep in sin, and I was sinking and I was swimming, and I couldn't make it to the dock, and people pointed at me. People tried to encourage me while I was drowning. But God came and got me. God is wonderful. Sue comes to this church house and she hears all of these testimonies about God. She's thinking that maybe it would be great to have a relationship with this person that they call God. He must be an amazing person. I've heard the testimonies of those that have had an encounter with him. Sue says, I think I want to know more about God. At some point, Sue is in a church She may be in her car. She may be at home. She may be walking in a field. And she's been thinking more and more about God. And then she does something kind of different. She says, God, I want to get to know you. The more I think about you, God, it fills me up. My heart seems to be full. For the first time as I think about you, I feel like a puzzle that's missing a piece. The scenery is beautiful. The colors are beautiful. The picture in itself is beautiful, but it's incomplete. But God, since I've met you, since I began to associate with people that love you and your Bible and your word, God, I think I want to get to know you. With our associates are people that we work with. If the place goes away, the relationship goes away. You'll see them down at the school system. You'll see them at the bank where you work. You might see them at the pool hall where you go and you shoot pool, and every now and then you see John or Sue down there. And as you see them, you associate them with a place. And I think what this epidemic and pandemic has done, it has revealed that although you and God are not strangers, and although you and God are not just acquaintances, but you and God are associates, and so you have a place-based faith. God is the really cool person that everybody likes, that you meet at church once a week, that you talk to somebody at the coffee shop about every now and then. He's an associate. So when they say, "Where's God?" you run down to the church house. And those are what we call seekers. And so a lot of us are seekers. We've done that religious stuff and all of that. And so we're really kind of seeking God. Kind of seeking Him. I don't want to do the religious stuff anymore. I don't want to check all the boxes and yet still be empty on the inside. God and I are not strangers. God and I are not just acquaintances, somebody that I've met, but I want to let you know I've been associating with God for a lot of years. And so some of us are disappointed in life because we expected more out of the relationship of associates. An associate is not a friend, and an associate is not a covenant partner. And so the whole thought of, if God is an associate in your life, when the place goes away, so does your God. When they tear down the break, the pool hall, all those folks for years that I associated with, the relationship is gone. You know, I think part of the part that challenged me and bothers me is that many of us at an earlier age poured our life into church activity, into the making of the church organization, but really did not develop a relationship with God that was more than that church affiliation, association, or membership. So that when the place went away, so did your fellowship with God. And it's almost like you can't really say this. But if we're honest, I meet enough people that say this without saying it. Oh, yeah. I used to know God. He's a pretty cool person. We were strangers, but I met him at the coffee shop down on 3rd. You know the one, 3rd and 20th, right there, yeah. Yeah, and we hung out and we shot pool at the Break Pool Hall. Every Thursday I was there. Yeah, me and God. Man, he was cool. He's like the life of the party. Everybody liked him. You ever meet that guy that everybody likes? Oh yeah, that's God. When's the last time you saw him? Well, once the pool hall went away, I hadn't seen him. Once the church went away, I hadn't seen him. Once the Bible study went away, I haven't seen God in a while. But he was a really cool person. And I think that people are disappointed because they say, wow, you know, I did the church thing for a while. I used to be a Christian. I used to be one of those. But I hadn't seen God in a while. Nobody ever really told us how to build and develop a relationship. That we go from being a stranger to being an acquaintance. We go from being an acquaintance to being an associate with a place. But if we would push in a little deeper and dig a little deeper, then we don't want to just hang out with God at the pool hall or God at the church on Sunday. You start looking for ways, scheduled encounters with God, to get to know Him better. You see, your fellowship with God goes along with the relationship. Every type of relationship has a fellowship that goes along with it. What is your fellowship with strangers? I don't have any because we don't know each other. What is your fellowship with an acquaintance? Oh, well, my fellowship with an acquaintance is it's someone who I met and we shake hands. How you doing? We recognize, hey, you're pretty cool. And when I see you, my fellowship with you is that I'm affable towards you. It's good to see you again, man. You go from being an acquaintance to an associate. That it's an external place and connection. And it's there at that external place that you see that person on a regular basis and you really enjoy it, and I'll see you next week. See you next week too. That's an associate. And if the place goes away, so does the relationship. And so for too many of us, our relationship with God has never evolved more than just being an associate. But then when there's something that's there that clicks, you want to dig deeper in the relationship. I just don't want to be associated with God on Sunday morning. And every now and then on a Tuesday or Wednesday night, I think I'd like to get to know Him. I don't want to just connect with God externally. I want to connect with Him internally. What's He like? What's His character like? What are some of the attributes of God that you like? See, it's the internal connections that makes the relationship special. Like a friend, it's it's those values that you hold. It's those principles. It's the thing that weaves together this thing that we call a constitution, and in its preamble it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and are endowed with their Creator with certain inalienable rights. The pursuit of life, the pursuit of liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Man, that's an internal conviction that begins to tie us together. And now our connections are not just externally, because we're in a place, but the internally. I think God is the type of person I could build a future with. I've gotten to know Him. I moved down the relationship continuum from a stranger to an acquaintance to an associate, kind of a place-based religion and faith, to a friend, to somebody that I've gotten to know, somebody that I've learned to trust more and more. I think that I would like to make covenant with this person named God. My friends, so many of us have never made covenant with the person of God. We've just been associated with him. Some of us have been acquainted with him. Yeah. I met him a couple of times. God is a stand-up guy. Maybe some of us are just associates. It's a place-based relationship. Yeah. Oh yeah, he's a really good friend of mine. I see him all the time. Every Sunday we go to the same church. Thursday night we go to the same pool hall. I really ain't gotten to know him that well. He's an associate. There are some people that have stopped right there as an associate with God. And during this time of the COVID-19 epidemic or pandemic, they found that they are very lonely. That the weekly fix is not enough. That maybe they need something that's more. And maybe they're disappointed because, I feel the disconnect from God because I haven't been going to church. I haven't been around the people. And I guess I want to say at that point, if you practice a place-based faith in God, then I guess I really want to say that there's something that's more that's there. People that never progress further than a place-based faith, all they talk to you about is their religion. They talk to you about certain scriptures, not that reveal God, but reveal practices. Confucius says, God says, Pastor so-and-so says. It becomes the habits of highly successful people. The 21 irrefutable laws. But never about the relationship. Never about what is God like. Never about his character and the like. I'm saying that there's something deeper. I'm saying that too many of us have learned just enough about God to be disappointed in him. I'm saying that there's more. Some of us have pushed forward and we're saying, I wanted to get to know God. Sunday morning's not enough. I want to get to know him. It's like the girl you bump into at work and she's an associate and you see her and you're like, wow, I'd really like to get to know her. Maybe it's time that you call God up again. Hey, we haven't talked in a while. I'd love to start spending time together outside of the place. Now, in the truest sense of the word, being born again and salvation, Sue on her track of going from an acquaintance to an associate. Excuse me, a stranger to an acquaintance to an associate, associated with a place, from an associate to a friend. May not have even been born again yet. Because see, it's when you become a friend, when you get to know someone better, that you can really trust them and rely on them. Because a faith that has not been tested cannot be trusted. And when you start meeting a person outside of the workplace, outside of the worship place, outside of this place and that place, they began to move more from just being an associate. As you get to know them better, you become friends. Well, we have telephones now, and we have social media. We have all those things where we get to know each other, and you start seeing a person's heart. Now a person is coming closer to the point of decision. And I'm speaking of an informed decision and not an uninformed decision and not a leveraged decision. I remember being, in my college Kappa days, we'd be down at Top Flight in Montgomery or the Fox Trap on 3rd Avenue, and we'd be in there and it's 1 a.m. and we say, man, you need to get yourself up and go to jail. You're going to bust hell wide open, right? So you need to go show up at church. I remember that our allegiance to God was we would associate with him on Sunday. God was an associate. But then something happens. You begin to realize that the more you're around God, I want more. I want more. And so you start spending more time. You start learning about him. You start asking about him. Have you met God? What do you think about God? I'm thinking about going deeper with him. It's like a relationship. Oh, he's written a lot. I tell you what, I'm going to read some of his letters to learn more about him and some of the testimonials, because I'm thinking about going deeper with. You know what you're doing when you're asking and inquiring about someone you want to go deeper with? You're asking for referrals. You're asking for a testimonial, really. God's a really cool person. I think you ought to get to know him. So you began to dig in deeper. You began to clear a busy schedule and began to make more time for God. And then after friending God, and I guess that's a touching part for me, because one day I friended God and God friended me. And I was like, wow. God is a person that I can see spending the rest of my life with. And as you get to that point where you say, God is a person that I can see spending the rest of my life with, it's pretty special. I've gotten to know you. God, I used to be a stranger. You weren't on my mind. I used to be an acquaintance you were an acquaintance, God, who I bumped into every now and then. And then, God, you and I were associates. I would show up on Sundays and I'd see you there, and we'd be intentional about bumping into each other. I would be intentional about bumping into you, and this is the story of us, of God and us. This is my testimony. People spoke so well of you. You had a good name in the community. So I wanted to know you better. You're nothing like what I thought you were. I'd heard about you. But now I've gotten to know you, God, for myself, and you're pretty amazing. You ever meet that person that when you're around them, you feel like they make you a better person? That when you're around them, they're so positive and it changes your outlook on life, and instead of just co-signing with everything that you do, they challenge you to be better. They challenge you to be all that you can be, to live out your potential. There's something about being around a person like that. And as I got to know God, He is a person like that. He's like a missing chapter of a book that I've read 100 times. But when I insert that chapter, everything that came before that chapter, when I inserted in the middle this missing chapter of my favorite book called My Life, when I put that chapter in there, it just fits. Everything before that chapter, now makes sense. And everything after that chapter, up until this point, it's coming together. I see I'm on a journey. I see that my life has meaning since I put it in. It's like a missing verse in your favorite song. A song that you've sung 100 times. But then when you put that verse there in the middle, and God hates the day when my soul shall be sight, my sin not in part but in whole is nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. Praise the Lord, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul because of that missing piece right there. It's why peace like a river can attend my way. It's why sorrows like sea billows roll. It's why whatever my lot, that has taught me to say it is well with my soul. It's like the coming together of an amazing song. For many of us, before we friended God, for us, sometimes life were like words and music coming together, but could not quite become a song. So we laugh, we sing, we cry, we sigh, we question why, and wonder what can be wrong. And we realize something's missing. That God is that missing piece in my life. And it's at that point right there that the journey that you've been on with God is ready to go to another level. You look back over your journey with God and you say, wow, we were strangers. I didn't even know who He was when I moved here. And then I became acquainted with Him. I met Him through John. I bumped into Him at the coffee shop. I was walking down a busy street in New York City and someone tapped me on my shoulder. I looked, but I kept walking. That was God. I became acquainted with Him, bumping into Him here and there. And then we became associates. We began to hang out in the same places. And then we got to know each other, and we became friends. When we get to this place, it's where you say, God, I want to live my life with You. All my life I've been separated from You because I didn't know You. But now that I know You, the song has come together. The book has now makes sense. The journey now has a greater meaning. The colors are a little brighter. C.S. Lewis talks about going to heaven, and he says, when I looked at the colors, it was the greenest green that I've ever seen. And I can't explain it, but the shade of yellow was amazing. And the purple was so rich and deep. Since I've gotten to know You, God, my life has been like that. I'm ready to go in covenant with You. I'm ready to have that moment with You, God. I'm willing to publicly affirm it with a baptism. I'm willing to hear the voice of the Father saying, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to unite this woman with her God." Jesus would be the one performing the ceremony, I guess, because he says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes unto the Father except by me." And by believing that that is true, it is Jesus that I ask to come into my heart and to be a bridge to the rest of my life with God. To unite this man and his God, this woman and her God, for richer or poor, in sickness and in health, and through death we will never part. Do you accept Jesus Christ to be your God-given Savior? I do. And then we say, "God, with my heart, I thee wed." Your heart so overflowed. You're about to be born again. You profess your love for God. Through your friendship with God, you've learned to trust Him. You have a knowledge of God, who He is. You have an understanding of how He is, His character and His attributes. And you've professed faith in God. I believe in you, God. I trust in you, God, with my life and my future. It's at that point that we are born again. And when we become born again, something amazing happens. Because one of the amazing things that happens when we are born again, our priorities change. And so our relationship with God has now changed. And I think the disappointment that a lot of us have had with God is that we've never gotten to know Him. What He's like. So during a disaster, we say, "That's not God." And they say, "Well, you don't know Him. I was with Him. I hang out with Him. We are friends. I know Him." That's not God. And so I don't know where you are with God. I don't know if you're strangers. Maybe you are just an acquaintance with God. You bump into Him every now and then. Maybe you and God are associates. You've associated in different places. But let me say to you, as someone who knows you and knows God, you and God might be a match made in heaven. Literally. I think you ought to get to know Him. Spend some time together. You all get to know each other. And then I think you will have found your eternal mate. A relationship that you can have for eternity. You and God are good together. You're a better man, a better woman. You're a better daughter. You're a better friend. when you're with God. You're a better husband when you and God are closer together. There's a sparkle that's in your eye when you're with God. There's a wholesomeness. I've never seen you so happy than when you're with God. Have you been thinking a lot about God lately? God has been thinking